Excellent. Welcome to tonight's Match Official Webinar PD series, where we're looking at our 10th module, refereeing sevens. I do apologize for module 9 about managing stress not getting off the ground yet. We have had a significant amount of technical difficulty in getting our colleague to record and be able to present with us. So we're looking at some alternatives, but I'm hoping that we will be able to have that out to you guys, certainly in the next little bit. I'm hoping by the next couple of weeks. And then we'll build on the remaining 2 modules after that to finish off the year. So today we're going to be talking about refereeing sevens. I also do apologize. We were supposed to have a guest speaker and we had some circumstances change last minute. So it will be me again. And we will also be looking at a video from trying to keep things domestic, Canada's competitions from 2015, which I believe is our last video recorded iteration of the University Sevens Championships. So it'll be the time for referees of Eartex and Kuga. Yeah, should be good fun. So what I will do is run through this, and then if anyone has any questions, as we usually do, you have a question box that you can obviously please type in any questions that you may have, and then we'll get started. So today's objectives, there's a few things we're going to try and get off the ground. We're going to understand how sevens differentiates from 15s, notably as it pertains to the following 3 principles: time, space, and speed. And we'll take a look at how those affect our refereeing as we go through tonight's webinar. We'll also take a look at examples, obviously, of these effect of these principles and how they affect our refereeing of the game. And then lastly, we'll be reminded of our World Rugby High Tackle Framework and its implementation in Canada. So, as we always do, we'll take a look at how today's module is related to the Rugby Canada referee profile. So obviously the key factors are all the same and they apply across all codes of the game. Now, the question we're going to take a look at tonight is how do we emphasize certain parts of it and how do we go about implementing these key factors when we go out and referee. From a technical perspective, the main difference will be in the timing of our decisions, and we'll take a look at obviously these video examples and we'll see what that difference might be in contrast to what we usually see in 15s. From a tactical perspective, playing appropriate advantage is one of the more drastic changes in this perspective, and the other side of it is obviously wanting to reward teams with the space earned. It's a critical part of ensuring that we get good quality matches of sevens is being able to operate within respected amounts of space. So we'll take a look at what that means. And then finally, from a game management perspective, the one key factor is the influence of time, which can equal pressure on us as referees. So how do we deal with that pressure? And how do we then obviously use it to our advantage when we go time off and all that kind of stuff. So we'll take a look at those aspects of the profile as we go through the rest of the presentation. So one of the things I want to remind everyone is that we still want to set ourselves up for success. So positioning, the basic principles that we covered back in, I believe it was module 4 or 5, about where we, kind of put ourselves in the best and optimal position to see the infringements, the first infringement, as well as then using that positioning to then help us with the rest of our game management or anticipating what's coming next and being able to read the play and that kind of thing. So that's something I want to emphasize, and we'll take a look at an example in a minute. And then another key point is that although different in some ways with how the hooker binds to their props and stuff in sevens, the reality is the basic pictures are very, very similar, and we'll take a look at a couple of those examples. I'm not going to touch on too much technical aspects or law differentiations. We're not going to go over what's a free kick infringement off restarts and all that kind of stuff. What we're focused on is how do these core principles apply, but I wanted to make sure that we also get perspective of, okay, well, there's some things that from a basic level we still want to be the same. So when we take a look at this positioning piece, we'll have a good little understanding of what I mean here. So with this example, and again, as we do, we'll take a look at the video once through, and then we'll just have a quick little discussion about it. But the technical decision from the referee here isn't necessarily wrong, but in the context of the game, even though it's sevens, is it something where if we're better positioned, would we be able to deal with it differently? So the arrival here is very static. And what we'll see is that we're not, as a referee, in a position to see this incoming player into the ruck for white. And what we maybe could have done is, in a better position from that 45 on the attack side, maybe been able to shoo that player away using an arm, or asking them to stop going into that contact area, knowing that it was a ruck situation that they just wouldn't really be able to win from that position that they were in. And then maybe we can play away without a penalty. So it's just an example of not wanting to change too much. Now, to be fair, this is a video from 4 years ago. So there was a habit back at the time of refereeing, or at least in open play, being behind the defensive line quite a bit. And that's kind of really gradually changed to staying on the attack side now, which is why I said the principles of positioning haven't changed, and from 15s, and the principles of being in that good position to be able to manage the game still doesn't change either. Okay, so just something to be aware of. From a scrum perspective, the one thing we do want to be most aware of is the hooker. So let's just take a look at this. Right, so there's some clear issues with the bind there by Blues, loose head and hooker, but usually that's in an effort for the hooker to be the first one out of the scrum. Now, because it ends up turning, the loose head and hooker really separate, and the loose head looks like the one who's more egregiously infringed here. But what we really want to take a look at is why that happens, and it's because the hooker is in a position to want to leave the scrum first. Right, so because that's how they want to defend the scrum, they end up with a very loose bind where the hooker can slide out from underneath, which is fine once the ball is out. And it does help them speed up the ability to get out. But what we do need to do is obviously wait for the ball to be out, and we can't do it in an illegal way to try and win either some space or to try and illegally wheel the scrum. Okay, here's another picture. Again, similar, very similar to 15s here is what we're looking at. So the previous clip that we just saw, the similarity isn't in the hooker, obviously, because the hooker can't necessarily leave the 15 scrum that way. But just in terms of that loose head, you know, separating from the hooker if that's what their angle is. And we see that here again as well. Right, so we see the red team here with the loose head clearly separates from the hooker, right? And drives up the side of the scrum, right? So instead of getting under the chest of the tight head, they just drive around the side of the scrum. Okay, so just something we want to be aware of, in a very similar type of picture that, to scrums and 15s, just something we want to maintain. Okay, and finally, last one, what does a good scrum picture look like? Okay, so the couple of things that are really good about this example is it touches on a couple of topics that we've already picked up on. So the first is obviously what does that good scrum picture look like, the go forward, the pressure by White. And then the second part is how the referee, although time, we constantly tell ourselves, the speed of the game needs to be up in sevens. Once we go time off, although we don't want to take ages, the referee still has the time that they need to be able to make the decision, right? And so taking that time to go for a little walk, talk to the in-goal judge, ask the question in a clear manner, get the answer, and then confirm the decision, right? So we'll just replay that one more time. Good line up there by White, straight drive, put the pressure. White 9 starts on side, and a good chat here. Great question. So I've seen a grounding. Do you have a knock on? Now, another way to phrase that might be to say, do you have any reason not to award the try? So then we can obviously move on from there. Okay, so those are just some basics around the game that don't change really between sevens and 15s other than the hooker, right? So it's the only real technical piece of the game I wanted to touch on tonight. Okay, so time. What does time in sevens mean? Well, the biggest issue, not issue, but the biggest influence of time on our refereeing is that because we only have 14 minutes in a match, it dictates how we manage the game, notably around player behavior at the breakdown and set piece. So there's far less opportunity for downtime and captain chats, right? And so what we do have to do is take a zero tolerance approach for slowing the game down. So yellow cards need to be issued to players who are either throwing the ball away or otherwise impeding the game from continuing. So I know it might seem harsh, and maybe we turn around and we say, well, in this circumstance, maybe we don't need to. But the reality is that any action by players to not allow the game to continue in a cynically illegal way, I'm trying to be very careful with my words here, is liable to be yellow card, right? So let's just take a look at a couple of examples, and then we'll go from there. Right. So whether we agree with the decision in this particular context or not, the point is that it is an infringement on the 5 meter line in a good attacking position for White. And in a 15s game, we might turn around and say, you know what, I'm going to have a chat with the captain, warn the team, this many infringements down here on this area, all that kind of stuff. Whereas here, what we have to do in sevens is really make sure that we're being very critical about, did this negate a scoring opportunity or an opportunity to keep that ball moving quicker? And if it did, given where we are on the field, does it merit a yellow card? So we'll see it again here. Right? Tackler clearly not releasing, clearly in a position for White to be able to move the ball quicker had that tackler or tackle assist released, right? And we could have had a score much earlier in the game. Ignore the time and the clock. This is 2015, back when we still had 10-minute finals. And then the last one here is obviously for a cynical play as well. Okay, so once again, and I apologize, we had some audio and not throughout this whole game, but what we see is number 8 for you, Vic, or sorry, Gold. Let's call them Gold. Clearly offside after the ruck is formed out following the line break. So excellent work here by 9. End up making the cover tackle. 11 gets in to form that ruck. Now number 8 clearly offside, and then clearly reaches out, right? And so it's not a try scoring opportunity necessarily because there are other defenders for Gold retreating, but it's a very cynical infringement following a very significant line break. So it's an easy yellow card decision here. Okay. I don't have an example from this tournament that I could find, at least, of someone throwing the ball away specifically after a penalty or into touch, but it is something obviously that we've all seen, so let's just make sure we're aware of it. Yeah, so space. So obviously there's far more of it on the field with only 7 players aside, and what it mostly does is it helps us guide our use of advantage, right? So the first question we need to ask is it clear? Is there a clear opportunity for that ball to be moved and used appropriately by the non-offending team? And then what is obviously very different is the sense that sometimes blowing the penalty kicks right away is the best advantage for that non-offending team. So the ability to quick tap as players are retreating, although it's an option in 15s as well, because of the amount of space that is on the field in 7s, it can be a huge advantage. So we'll take a look at a couple of examples where we get some audio and the advantage is clearly on here, and we'll just see what does that look and sound like. Okay, so after the first infringement, we'll see following the quick tap, Gold 11, I believe, is offside. And we'll hear the referee with a very quick advantage call, right? So it's nice and early, everyone knows. And then advantage over right after the line break there. So excellent communication by the referee, and it's clearly on, right? It's clearly an opportunity for Black to be able to play the ball in that space now that they've had following that penalty, right? So clear advantage, not 10, and then clear advantage over. Okay, so really tough to hear the referee in this one. Let's try one more time and see if I can get a little more audio for you all. Bizarre, because you could hear it when I was listening to it earlier. I'm not sure if you guys could hear the referee or not, but basically it's a advantage following the knock on by Blue, and then literally as soon as the white player takes about 3 or 4 steps through the gap, it's advantage over, because really that's all that advantage ever is in 7. So it's just something to be aware of, possibly in 15s in that kind of situation as well, but just really being aware that playing advantage out of hope is not what we're looking for in 7s. What we're looking for is, are these clear opportunities for an advantage? And if they're not, then should we be calling advantage, or should we just be blowing the penalty? So what we'll do is we'll take a look at a couple of examples in the next slide here to look at what does that actually look like. Actually, yeah, maybe this one and the next slide, I believe. So individual speed obviously is one aspect of 7s, but so is the desire for us as referees to resume play quickly, and the players. So what's our approach to that? So the first is to be flexible with the quick tap within a certain radius around the mark, as long as it's behind it, right? So if we're on a meter and a bit either side of where that mark is, let's just try and play on. If we're egregiously ahead of it, then let's bring it back. If we're slightly ahead and everyone's happy enough to play on, let's just move along, right? So opportunities for us to play on is critical in sevens. So if we can find out how we can do that, that's great. And what I do want to do is, as we'll go through these clips, I do want to remind everyone that there's still room to manage the game when it's appropriate. So we'll look at what does that actually look like, right? So it's not just about accuracy and decisions and quick decision making, but also about making a decision to do things a little bit differently. When is that appropriate in sevens? Right, so we're gonna have, I think it's 5 clips here, and we'll just watch these through and have a quick chat through them.
Big tackle coming from Nellis. That was touch high. Nellis doing the quick.
Right, so all I want us to do is be aware of what happens in sevens quite a bit. Let's ignore the fact that, yes, it was more than a touch high, the tackle. That was a dangerous tackle that today would be penalized, and I know that referee crew would get that without question. But the more important part is just being very aware of the players on the field, who's allowed to throw the ball in quick, because these are the types of incidences that we see, or instances or moments that we see in a sevens game far more. So the red player does a really good job here of following the tackle, getting back to her feet, staying behind the mark where the ball needs to be thrown in, and throwing it in 5 meters, right? So good awareness by the AR and the referee to just take a look around. All good, let's play on, right? So finding ways to be able to play on, but just being very aware of what players are entitled to do in those positions.
So Maddie Seidel with the ball, she'll get things underway as the replacement comes on. That's Steph Black, who has replaced Ashley Gordon. Quick tap ball now. Gordon, she'll score as her shorts are getting ripped off there.
Okay, so a couple reasons why I really like this clip. One is when we take a look at it at first glance, we wonder why necessarily are we penalizing blue here in that breakdown, and mostly because we see a first arriver who's got her hands clear on the ball. But what we'll do is we'll see the tackler on the ground do a good job here of really just slowing it down that fraction of a second. So keeping her arm on the ball here really just slows it down that fraction of a second enough for the next arriving player for blue to be able to be in a position to poach it. So excellent decision here by the referee on a very technical decision, but these are the types of things in sevens that matter the most, right? So the timing of the whistle is pretty good, right? We don't wait to see if there's that clean out or the turnover. We're not going to get good quick ball out of this, so let's just end it, right? And again, there's no sense in playing an advantage here for red, because there would never be an advantage, right? So this is a great example of where the penalty is the advantage. And then excellent awareness by the referee to then, you don't even need to listen to it. What we can do is just watch the motion and the action, right? So good communication with the players, making them aware of where they are, not 10, play on, try a given, right? So that's just an excellent example of some refereeing that we want to, all take on board. That's the whole point of this, right?
And a big tackle being put on Laura Crow-Hutchin, the captain. Look at her body position. Trying to get that ball back. Now penalty. Called against McMaster while Nellis still.
Right, so again, same thing by the referee. It's just another example of how what can seem like a very kind of nuanced technical decision is actually what we need in sevens to ensure, especially early in the game, that later in the game we have some good flow. So we'll see the tackle assist here for red on the wrong side of the quote unquote wrong side of the tackle, right? So hasn't come around through her gate and is now contesting. And what she's doing is just slowing the clean out down enough to prevent the ball from being able to be moved, right? And so again, no advantage for blue would come from that, right? Because we're not going to get the ball out quickly enough for us to be able to use that space very well. So good work here by the referee to just blow that one straight up. And again, you heard move, move, right? Making sure that they get back to 10 meters.
players out. They can use it. They go wide. Running into two tacklers there is Stewart, fresh on the field. And a penalty awarded to the Thunderbirds, not for...
All right, so this is where we always run into controversy, I suppose, as referees, is how long do we wait for the clean out to try and do the work when there's a first arriver on defense who's trying to poach the ball. So I think the referee gets it really, really well here, where he looks to see if that first initial contact by that first arriver drives the first support player drives off that first defender off the ball. And as soon as he realizes it can't, we're gonna just blow the penalty and give that ball there to White, who's obviously in a what do you call it, strong position to be able to turn the ball over there, right? So timing of the whistle is critical in sevens, because what it does is it allows for players to get a good understanding of what they're actually able to do, right? The longer we wait, oftentimes, then the more questions players will be able to ask. So finally, let's just take a look at this situation here where we can try and manage the game. So again, this is where our tactical use of our game understanding is important for us to implement here in this situation. So let's look at the score. Let's look at the time left on the clock. So it's counting down, and then let's see what happens.
Referee saying that the ruck is legal here. Paul. Out wide to Stewart. Crosby Stewart stops, cuts back. Oh, and just held on by the boots. UBC just desperate not to make a mistake, but they got to play to win too. It's not like they're defending the lead. They need the ball and they need to score. 30 seconds left here. Fergus Hall on the outside, spinning it. Nathan Stewart taking up into contact. 25 seconds left. Lucas Hammond, who under pressure. Crosby Stewart. Oh, and a big hit there, just outside the 22. About 30 meters on. Lucas Hammond goes himself. Doug Fraser bobbles it, and Doug Fraser will score in the corner. The UVic Vikes.
Okay, so I mean, it's one of those situations where, compared to the very first clip that we showed on the referee's positioning, this is all the same game. You see how much darker it got in 20 minutes. But what we'll see here is the referee does an excellent job at this next phase here of, or this next breakdown of understanding what the context of the game is. It never was going to be any quicker to come out here in this situation, right? And that's an easy one to be able to point that player back from a good position, right? And all of that leads to a try. And that's the only reason why I wanted to show it, was because in other situations, we can sometimes see referees make a decision here that maybe doesn't really need to be made, right? And so I think what it comes down to is, well, what's that balance? Where's that balance between what a technical decision needs to be made to kind of set that standard, knowing we don't have that time for downtime chat with players and captains necessarily, and getting buy-in verbally. We need to very much do so with our whistle at times in sevens. But here now we've established what that is, that context. Gold has already taken 2 yellow cards in the game, yet they're still in it. Everyone's exhausted, so we know we're going to have a line break, or we're going to get a broken or missed tackle or something if we can get some continuity going, right? And so it's a really good job here of the referee to just push this player aside with some communication, some nonverbal and verbal communication, and then we're able to get the ball moving again. So I think that's a really, really strong example of excellent refereeing when it comes to the context of the game, right? And it's just something we want to be aware of. So even though it's sevens and even though we want quick decisions, we also want them to be relevant for what's happening in the game in front of us. Okay. So that's really it. I didn't want to get to too much of the technical aspects of sevens. We know what a lot of that stuff is, right? We know what it means in terms of free kick decisions, off restarts, and how much time we have after a try to kick, and who kicks off, and all that kind of stuff, right? I think the focus for me today was really to look at what is the most relevant decision for us to make and why. that is, right? And so what we're trying to do is take it away from some of the nuances of the laws and really just be critical about the specificity of it, right? So the emphasis, which we talked about early in the presentation around the referee profile, is on that technical perspective, is just being accurate. So when there is an infringement, we're accurate. We have a good sense of when an advantage is clear and when it's appropriate to play advantage. And then that we have a good, strong, quick whistle when we do see that infringement in order for players to have that clear understanding of what it is we're expecting. Right? So as we do, notes for our coaches and match officials, I think it's pretty simple for this week is we're going back to that pre-match planning process. So has the referee outlined specific ways they're going to address the differences in refereeing the principles for sevens in their match plan, right? So have they outlined what that looks like? Okay, and we would want to take a look at some of those key words that we use today around time, space, and speed. Okay, and again, that other part about when we did our session on managing players or game management, we looked at referee time is, stop time is my time, right? Stop time is referee time, and that's the time when we can collect ourselves and make a good, strong decision by using the time available to us. We don't need to rush a yellow card decision. We don't need to rush a try decision if we have ARs and in goals, right? We can just take our time, go for a little walk, have a really quick chat, and then make a decision. So the other big thing around this is sevens tournaments in Canada tend to be one-offs, sometimes in the middle of a 15 season. So ironically, I say that as we do this presentation with the 15s World Cup ongoing, but I think my point for scheduling it this way was because I anticipated a little bit more fall sevens this year than we ended up getting off the ground in some areas. And now with the university sevens schedule kind of being planted in that February, March, April time frame. Although it's always been in the spring, it's we used to have a lot of club tournaments in the fall, and so I think we might be rejigging this one for next year, just in the timelines. But as it stands, this is one of the pieces that we discussed when putting the schedule together, was when do we tend to have sevens tournaments. And so if we do have a sevens tournament kind of right in the middle of that 15 season, what are we doing to adjust, right? So how can we help referees make some quick mindset changes? And obviously the more purposeful we can be with our practice, especially out on the field, and especially during team training runs, that's probably our best opportunity to be able to see some more success in transitioning between 15s and sevens. Okay, last point, as always, we're going to touch on player welfare and just a reminder of the World Rugby High Tackle Framework. So as of July 1st in Canada, it's been implemented across all domestic competitions. And it's just a good time for a reminder right now with the start of the BC season this month, as well as college and university seasons across the country kicking off. So just something to be aware of, and make sure that if you have any issues or questions around it, that you go to the linked website here, or when you go to the laws website, it's the first item under law application guideline. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, as always, please feel free to throw them in the text box, or fire me a note at some point. Pretty quick and dirty today. Excellent. Well, question about the last webinar posted. So back in August, I'm surprised that it's not up. Yes, I will get that posted. I will do so as soon as I'm done this, because tonight's won't be available till tomorrow. So yes, I can definitely do that as soon as I'm done here. Apologize for that. Okay, any other questions? Doesn't seem so. Okay, folks, we're going to be done early. I appreciate everybody's time. And as always, I look forward to hearing from you. Our next webinar will be in the end of October. And not gonna lie, I can't remember off the top of my head what the subject matter will be, but it will be exciting. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great evening, folks.